Determined to go on a new adventure, Finn and Jake are sucked into the Minecraft universe and then have to fight huge monsters to survive inside a video game. Today we're going to recap the story of the series, Adventure Time. After being sent to the world of Minecraft, Finn has to fight zombies and gather resources to survive. While the teenager works to keep the farm safe, Jake devotes his time to mining diamonds for a personal project. Seeing his friend working hard to achieve his goal, Finn decides to help him and together they manage to fill a cart with precious stones. After a few hours of work, Jake has all the diamonds he needs to move on to the next stage and throws the crystals into a river of lava. Frustrated at seeing all that waste, Finn decides to take one of those stones to create something new and asks Marceline, the vampire queen, for her suggestion on what to build. However, it's Princess Bubblegum who helps him with his project and gathers some materials to create a fireworks rocket. Suddenly, the trio hears Lemongrab freaking out because he can't grow a lemon, so Princess Bubblegum decides to help him. Meanwhile, Finn pays a visit to Tree Trunk's house to buy some pumpkin pie and hitches a ride back home with Mr. Pig. On the way, they meet an Enderman and, on seeing it, the pig gets scared. When the animal runs away, Finn realizes that the creature is approaching and closes his eyes to avoid looking at it. At that moment, the monster stops chasing him and Finn stands there staring at the creature's feet until nightfall, because he knows that if he doesn't, the Enderman might attack him. Seeing his friend in the middle of the forest, Lumpy Space Princess approaches to find out what's going on and, on seeing her, the monster moves away. However, just then, the Ice King appears to steal the pumpkin from Finn's backpack and becomes Enderman's new target. The next morning, when he wakes up, Lemongrab realizes that the lemon he planted has already grown into a large tree, but he soon discovers that the tree has turned into an apple tree. While Lemongrab tries to deal with his frustration, Tree Trunks shows up and picks some apples to use as an ingredient in her pies. When he gets home, Finn shares the pumpkin pie with his friend Jake and shows him the object he built with the diamond he picked up. However, when he lights the rocket, the young man destroys the roof of the cave and is unable to release the fireworks. After this incident, the two friends return to their world. They are at home playing video games and Finn destroys all the enemies that appear in front of him. However, when he encounters Sleepy Sam, the young man is defeated and becomes angry. He believes that if he were inside the game, he would be able to defeat the villain, so Jake asks BMO to help him transport them into his brain system. However, the device claims that this is too dangerous and does not allow the pair to enter the game. Upon hearing this, Finn and Jake leave and wait for BMO to fall asleep to make him press the red button that transports the duo to the inside of his brain. When this happens, Finn and Jake once again become video game characters and, in the very first minutes of the game, the dog loses 2 lives by jumping into a river. On the third attempt, the two friends finally manage to cross the first hurdle and Jake has to watch out, because if he loses one more life he risks dying in the real world. While trying to defeat his first opponent, Finn loses his first life, but soon returns and helps his dog collect the coins they find during the game. Suddenly, the honey bunny materializes next to them and the pair end up losing their coins trying to escape. Just ahead, Finn and Jake come across their greatest rival in the game and, realizing that the Sleepy Sam is taking a nap, the young man sneaks up on him to try and destroy him. However, when he realizes the intruder's presence, the frog attacks him with its supersonic scream and Finn is pushed away. With Jake's help, the teenager manages to get close to the enemy once again, but ends up being devoured by it and loses his second life in the game. Terrified, the pair decide to run back to the starting point and once again face all the villains they have encountered during their journey. In an attempt to defeat all 3 enemies at once, Jake picks up a bomb and ends up causing an error in the game. At that moment, both he and Finn are sucked back into their world, but end up causing an injury to BMO's body. Then the game's monsters are unleashed and attack the two friends. But before they can be eliminated, Sleepy Sam is enchanted by the sunshine and convinces the other creatures to leave them alone. The trio then decide to seek revenge on BMO for imprisoning them for so many years, so Bouncy Bee and Honey Bunny team up to destroy him. Determined to protect his video game, Finn uses the skills he acquired with that game to send the monsters back to their world. Furious with Finn and Jake for all the damage they've caused, BMO decides to send them back to his brain system and challenges them to another match. After finally defeating the 3 enemies and winning the game, Finn and Jake decide to go in search of a mysterious cave and are walking through the forest when they come across a train speeding through the woods. So the only way to continue on his journey is to wait for the vehicle to pass by and clear the tracks. However, 2 hours have passed and Jake decides to investigate what is going on. As he stretches his body, he realizes that there is a circular track around the forest, which means that the train will go round and round forever. So the solution is to get into one of the wagons to try and get to the other side. Suddenly, a thief appears and attacks Finn, but the young man manages to push him off the train and steals the sword he left behind. Curious to find out what's in the other wagons, the two friends decide to visit each one, and Finn eliminates all the monsters that appear on the way with his new sword. However, when Finn reaches the last carriage, he encounters the strongest creature living on the train and must defeat the boss to advance to the next stage. This time, the young man is almost defeated, but in the end he manages to come out of the duel victorious. Tired of taking part in those battles, Jake tries to persuade him to continue his journey in search of the mysterious cave, but the young man is enjoying himself and keeps going from wagon to wagon eliminating the enemies. After several hours in that endless loop, Jake realizes that his friend is fighting the same opponents he defeated a short time ago and tries to warn him, but Finn ignores him and continues gathering weapons to help him during the battles. Among the various artifacts he has collected, Finn comes across the crystal from the future, and Jake discovers that his friend is destined to remain on that train until he grows old. If he carries on like this, the young man will become one of the bosses, and, so as not to risk ending up like him, Jake says he's leaving. However, instead of leaving, the dog spends the night on the roof of the train together with a monkey and, at dawn, returns to the train in order to make one more attempt to rescue his friend from that loop. Realizing that Finn has already started his transformation process, the dog decides to take him off the train against his will, but the young man attacks him and manages to escape. Before fleeing, he steals Jake's backpack and, looking at the crystal from the future, realizes that his friend will remain by his side until the end. To prevent the dog from wasting his whole life in that place, Finn decides to leave with him, and the crystal from the future shows the two of them returning home. After leaving the train, Finn and Jake meet BMO again and notice strange sparks coming from the treehouse. Upon entering, they come across a holographic machine and receive a message from Jake's father. In the message, Joshua says that he has perished, but before he passed away, he reveals that he has built a dungeon full of monsters and traps. If they manage to pass all the challenges, Finn and Jake will have access to a sword made of demon blood, and this prize will encourage them to go in search of the dungeon, which is located under a rock in an underground hideout. Upon entering, the pair come across a pile of hamburgers and hot dogs, which are joined together to form the bodies of two large monsters. After defeating them, the pair move on to the next challenge and have to choose which of the two paths to take. Instead of facing yet another disgusting monster, Jake prefers to follow the flower trap, and, when the two friends enter the hallway, they are greeted by beautiful women who advise them to eat the fruit on the table. Believing the food to be harmless, Finn decides to try an apple, but before he can take the first bite, Jake snatches the fruit out of his hand and shoves it into the mouth of one of the women. After the first bite, the beautiful girl turns into a giant apple and is devoured by her own zombie friends. After eating the fruit, the creatures chase the invaders, but they climb over the wall and make it safely to the other side. Just then, Finn and Jake find a hole in the wall and decide to go in to find out what's inside. To his surprise, Finn finds the demon's blood sword and tries to free it from the chains. Suddenly, the young man is attacked by a pair of giant hands and the monster reveals itself. When faced with the great power of his latest adversary, Finn realizes that the only way to stop him is to take possession of that sword, so he manages to destroy the chains. With his newest weapon in hand, the teenager rushes towards his adversary and pierces the demon's eye. With this blow, Finn is able to defeat him, then returns to the surface in the company of Jake and eliminates the demon, who appears to take his blood back. A few days after surviving the dungeon, the pair decide to return to the forest to continue their mission to find the mysterious cave, and this time they don't get stuck on the train. After climbing the mountain, the two friends finally manage to find it, and Finn is the first to enter. At that moment, he accidentally steps on a trap and closes the cave gate, making it impossible for Jake to pass through. In an attempt to find a way out, the young man chooses one of 3 passages to follow and ends up falling into a secret room. After a few minutes of walking, he comes across a giant door similar to a safe, but he can't open it. After numerous attempts, Finn finds a labyrinth and hears Jake calling out to him. Following his friend's voice, the young man finally manages to get out of the cave and returns home with his dog. But as night falls, Finn begins to think that it was all just a dream and that he is actually still trapped in the cave. At dawn, when he opens his eyes, he realizes that his suspicions were right, and this loop repeats itself every time he wakes up. After numerous failed attempts to return home, Finn decides to return to the cave with his eyes closed, because if he opens his eyes he will be teleported back into the main hall. However, as he can't see anything in front of him, it takes the young man much longer to reach his final destination, and he spends days living in the forest like a savage until he finally reaches his destination. When he finds the main hall, the young man opens his eyes and returns to reality, but after so many attempts to escape, He already knows every bit of that labyrinth. Thanks to the various dreams he had while trapped, Finn finds his way out and, this time, actually manages to return to the surface to meet up with his friend. The very next day, the pair return to their routine and Finn is drawing the Ice King on his computer when a brick comes through the window of the tree house and Jake finds a ribbon stuck to the object. Watching the recording on the computer, the two friends come across a macabre scene and, when they try to delete the video, they discover that the tape has been infected with a virus. When their computer starts giving them problems, Finn and Jake leave home and go to Princess Bubblegum for help. At this point, they come across the Ice King and discover that it was he who sent that infected tape. The man then reveals that when the virus finishes its work, all the inhabitants of the planet will be deleted, except for him and Princess Bubblegum. The Ice King's plan is to do this so that the princess has no other people to relate to and agrees to marry him. Immediately, Finn rushes to try to prevent this from happening, but all the inhabitants of the town begin to disappear before his eyes and he despairs. Their only chance of preventing the world from being destroyed is to hack into the source of the universal code and destroy the virus that is devouring everyone. Meanwhile, Princess Bubblegum attacks the Ice King to force him to hand over the antivirus, but he claims that he didn't create an antivirus and, in a few minutes, everything in the world will be deleted until only the two of them are left. Now, the princess's only hope is that her friends can stop the virus, but Finn's body has already been deleted. He then loads a sword into his mouth and, with Jake's help, the young man uses his weapon to cut open the monster's belly. The next step is to remove everything stored inside, so the pair make the virus put everything out to force it to return the residents. At that moment, all the inhabitants of the city are sent back and the two friends walk around proud of themselves for having managed to save their world. Now that everything's back to normal, Finn and Jake go after the princess and find Princess Bubblegum in the Ice King's castle. After destroying the man's computer, Princess Bubblegum runs to hug her friends and congratulates them on their excellent work. That night, while watching the stars, Finn and Jake spot a bright light in the sky and Hot Dog Princess realizes that it is a call for help from her knights. When they discover that the princess's servants are in trouble, the pair offer to help them and, after a few minutes of walking, the two friends find the entrance to the labyrinth. To avoid getting lost during the rescue, Jake has the idea of wrapping his legs around a tree trunk and stretching out to accompany Finn through the maze. They soon meet the Hot Dog Knights and discover that at the center of the labyrinth lies a magical creature that makes wishes come true. Upon hearing this, Finn decides to go there and continues into the labyrinth when he notices that Jake's body is tapering off and begins to worry. Just then, the group comes across a golem and Jake uses his elastic body to hold it back. After rolling up the monster's entire body, the dog manages to knock it down and continues through the labyrinth until it can no longer stretch. Suddenly, dozens of scorpions start coming out of a hole in the wall and attack the invaders, so Jake uses his own body to block the passage and ends up being poisoned. Worried about his friend, Finn suggests they leave, but the dog is determined to make a wish come true and convinces him to continue the journey. After crossing numerous obstacles, they come across a giant statue and Finn realizes that Jake has reached his limit. The dog is so stretched out that he can't even blink, so Finn comes to the conclusion that they've gone too far, but the Hot Dog Knights encourage him to complete the mission. To do this, Jake has to stretch and solve the cat puzzle in the statue's hands. As they do so, the gates open and the group enters to place their order. Just then, one of the knights knocks over the puzzle and the gate closes again, crushing Jake's body. When the mud monster appears, Finn says he'll use his wish to save his friend, but Jake wastes his wish by ordering a sandwich because he's so hungry. So instead of saving the dog, Finn uses his wish to ask for a two-headed elephant and then uses the creature's wish to cure Jake. The two friends then hitch a ride on the overpowered elephant and fly out of the labyrinth together with the Hot Dog Knights. After returning from his latest mission, Finn is talking to Lumpy Space Princess when they are both interrupted by the arrival of Jake and BMO. While he's having fun with his friends, the video game triggers a warning signal and, shortly afterwards, his brain system is invaded by the weather service, which issues a storm warning for that region. The system advises residents to seek safe shelter immediately, as a major hurricane will arrive soon. Upon hearing this, Finn decides to build an underground shelter for him and his friends, but Jake refuses to help him and spends all his time enjoying nature while his friends work. The dog claims that he is performing a very important task, so BMO gives up trying to convince him to help and teams up with Finn and Lumpy Space Princess to finish building the shelter in time. Thanks to a lot of hard work, the trio managed to build a hideout before the storm arrives and the princess is stocking up on food when she starts freaking out about Jake's absence. The princess asks if the dog will stay with them at the shelter and Finn says yes. However, Lumpy Space Princess thinks it's unfair that Jake should enjoy something he didn't work to build and says she'll teach him a lesson. Immediately, the princess goes out to look for him and finds the dog sitting on the edge of a cliff. Furious, she asks what Jake is doing that is so important that he couldn't help his friends build the underground shelter, and the dog invites her to watch the sunset. The truth is that Jake has spent the last few days making the most of nature because he doesn't know when he'll be able to return to the surface. What's more, he has doubts as to whether the place will be the same when the storm passes, because the hurricane could destroy everything it finds along the way. When she discovers the real reason for her friend's omission, Lumpy Space Princess gets even more stressed and leaves. The next day, when the first heavy cloud appears over the valley, Jake quickly rushes to the shelter, and Finn is disappointed when he discovers that his friend has spent the whole time making useless notes in his notebook. Suddenly, the discussion is interrupted by a bolt of lightning, and the young man rushes to close the door while BMO turns on the lights. All the group has to do now is sit and wait for the storm to pass, but the Lumpy Space Princess devours all the food, and in a few days the food supply is completely empty. To make matters worse, the wood that was being used to seal the door is destroyed, and Finn blames Jake for not helping them build that shelter, because if that had happened, they would have been able to stock up on more food. Desperate, the princess starts running around and accidentally destroys the wires that bring electricity to the place. Now that they're hungry and in the dark, the group starts arguing with each other, and Jake sees the perfect opportunity to demonstrate why he didn't take part in building the shelter. The truth is that the dog was observing nature in order to be able to reproduce the sounds of animals while he and his friends were isolated from the rest of the world. Hearing that noise, the trio remember what life was like before the storm hit and get emotional. However, all the joy they are feeling is interrupted by the arrival of a tornado, which invades the underground shelter and threatens to wipe out everyone there. In an attempt to stop the creature from taking his friends, Jake starts imitating the sounds of nature and convinces the tornado to stop the storm to watch the birds sing. At this point, the cyclone realizes that he has forgotten what it feels like and decides to leave to enjoy the rest of the day contemplating nature. After Jake convinces the storm to go away, his friends apologize for doubting him, because it was thanks to the dog's work that they managed to survive. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.